There's been a consistent refrain recently from legacy automakers about how there is no EV demand, but if we take a closer look, we can see that the real crux of the problem actually is the interface, the software that users are dealing with, and the fact that it just doesn't work well, while at the same time there are many brands from China and especially Tesla that are doing a great job at this. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I want to talk specifically today about Chevy and VW and Ford and the significant software woes that all of them are having right now. And that is layered on top of course, the difficulty of producing electric vehicles at scale and making them profitable for these companies, while at the same time we see Tesla and several Chinese brands doing a really good job of building software. Tesla has been doing it for over a decade now. And it's clear, especially in China right now, but I also believe in the European and North American markets, which are the second and third largest car markets in the world, that this is also happening. Consumers are just not satisfied with the software that they're getting on legacy auto, and they're looking more and more at other options, especially, of course, Tesla, but also a bunch of Chinese brands that are doing really well at that right now. So I'm going to look at several X posts and several articles and things like that to sort of get a feel for all of this. And obviously I'm not being completely inclusive here. Otherwise this video would probably be about 5 hours long. So I'm going to start with this Business Insider article from a couple of months ago and just pull out a specific section of it. Of course, I will leave a link to this and everything else in the description, so you can check them out fully if you're interested. Anyway, if you look at this last section, you can see that they say this freshness is a really critical buying factor for Chinese brands. The older a model gets on the market, the less desirable it is. Now, you could argue that Tesla doesn't refresh their vehicles. You know, they've still got the Model 3 or something like that, but basically Tesla is constantly upgrading their vehicles. And of course, you notice that the significantly refreshed Highland Model 3 came out in China first. So you can see that Chinese consumers are very forward-moving, very forward-thinking about that, but also that Tesla, even if they aren't officially upgrading their vehicles, they're constantly tweaking and iterating on the vehicles and making them better and better. And of course, you get software updates for free, which makes the vehicles more accessible, more fun. You get holiday updates, you get new features, all of that kind of stuff. So even a car that you've bought, you get a feeling of a new vehicle. Anyway, continuing, these companies are able to get products in front of buyers in a very short time, something that other firms across the globe just haven't mastered. New car launches out of legacy automakers are often slowed down by a traditional way of doing things, and that is darn well the truth. Chinese companies simply aren't constrained like that, nor do they allow delays. They're more comfortable taking risks, even if it means having to update software once a vehicle has already come out, taking on a startup mentality instead of being locked into stringent product development processes. And then importantly, this last paragraph, they will become bigger and stronger competitors and players, potentially a source of disruption for some of the mature automakers, Dyer added, and I would say not potentially, but definitely. We believe it means that mature automakers have to change the way they do business to meet this disruptive competition. So this is specifically about the Chinese auto buyer, but I would argue that in the United States, Canada, the European market, etc., people are pretty aware of this as well, and a lot of this really comes down to phones. You know, whether you get an Android or iPhone or whatever, you're used to consistent software updates that make your hardware better, and of course you're used to refreshing your phone every couple of years or something, but there's just this expectation of continually improving products, and not like a new cup holder or something after 5 years or a new paint color scheme or something, but really fundamentally different and better things. And so what we're seeing now is legacy auto has started to try to figure out how to do this, but they're doing a very poor job at it. So as we begin to look at this, let's take a look at Ford first. And this is anecdotal, of course. This is one picture from one vehicle, and it looks like a Mach E because it's got that horrible like scroll wheel in the middle of the touchscreen, which is, and also vertical touchscreen, ew. Anyway, I don't know why all this seems very like 2010, 2012 when Tesla came out with the original Model S. But anyway, you can see here it says update not successful, which can happen sometimes. And then it says, unfortunately, a software update was not successful. Your vehicle cannot be driven. Call customer support. And then for the tow truck operator. So basically they're saying this car is bricked until you take it back to a dealership to have it fixed, however they're going to do that. So this is not a good look. Now, to be fair, I did go out and Google Tesla software updates breaking their vehicles and stuff. And there were some earlier on in time, like, 8 or 9 years ago. More recently, there have been some, but they almost always seem to be related to the 12-volt battery. And interestingly enough, that might be why I saw an error when I went to Tesla service recently, and I did a video on that. You can check it out up here if you're interested. But I went there and there was a break weird thing with my car, and they gave me a loaner vehicle. And the first one they gave me, I got in the car and it said your 12-volt battery is too low to do the software update that is, in the queue or something. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. So that might be a relatively new thing on Tesla's part, because I believe what happens is it does the software update and then it restarts the vehicle, and then it uses the 12-volt battery to go in and do a bunch of self-diagnosis and self-testing and everything. And if that battery voltage is too low, it can, fail to get through all of those tests. And so it looks like what Tesla has done is they've updated their software to not allow you to do the update if your battery is too low. So of course, this Ford update is anecdotal in the sense that there's no statistics. There's just one example of this. I've seen it reposted a bunch of places. I want to be fair to Ford, but at the same time, they also are the most recalled vehicle manufacturer on the planet, I believe, certainly in the United States, and in 2023 and in 2022, and I believe in 2021. So they have had some significant quality problems over the years, and getting their software updates proper and not bricking your car is a pretty important thing. Just to put this in perspective, I have updated our vehicles, our two Teslas, 3 times in the last 2 days, because we got 2 software updates for our Model 3 and 1 for the Model Y. All of them worked fine. They took about 25 minutes, and then the car just functioned, and it was like, here's your updated software. It's got the holiday release stuff and all of that good stuff that you wanted. So no bricking of the car. And again, statistically, there would be a huge outcry if there was any significant number of Teslas that were being bricked. So again, while this is anecdotal, it is not a good look for Ford. Clearly, they don't want to have something like this happen. And clearly, if it did happen, it would be way better if there was just some way they could contact the vehicle remotely and sort of reset it. You can do that with your phone. Every once in a while over the years, I've had an iPhone update go south. And the worst case scenario is that you just do like a factory reset and the thing kind of goes back to square one, and then it works and you have to reinstall, and it's a pain in the butt, but it's not like your phone is permanently unusable at that point. Whereas this is, until you take it to the dealership, obviously you're going to not be able to use your car. And that's a pretty big deal. If you depend on that to go to work or something like that, you want your car to be functional. You don't want to be terrified of doing a software update. So again, obviously not a good look on Ford's part. Next, we will move on to the Chevy Blazer EV, which started production a couple of months ago, and so not that many people have it yet. You can see AJ a couple of days ago posted, it appears GM delivered an amazing electric vehicle with the Chevy Blazer EV, ironically, of course. Edmunds got one for a long-term testing, and they are thrilled. Biden was right, Mary Barra led, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Edmunds on December 20th said, our Chevy Blazer EV has 23 problems after only 2 months, the single longest list of major faults we at Edmunds have ever seen on a new car. And if you don't know Edmunds, they test vehicles, so they're kind of an important company to keep happy. So turning to that Edmunds article, you can see they say, it's always frustrating to see a warning light on your car's dashboard. So imagine how we felt when we got 8 different warning messages from our long-term 2024 Chevy Blazer EV over the course of 1 day. Now consider that our Blazer EV, which we bought less than 2 months ago, has fewer than 2,000 miles on its odometer. In just one trip from LA to San Diego and back, our Blazer EV went from perfectly fine to totally on the fritz, and that's only the beginning. So I'm just going to read pieces of this article. I highly recommend reading the whole thing. It's very entertaining. Definitely link in the description. Anyway, they say, then things got worse. Closer to home, numerous error messages popped up. Service vehicle soon, service high voltage system, and service 12-volt system. Cool. Later that day, after shutting off the Blazer EV and letting it chill out for a while, we started it and were greeted with a blank infotainment screen again, and yet another error that read unable to charge service charging system. This despite the fact that the car wasn't even plugged in. At that point, the Blazer displayed a little turtle icon and showed reduced acceleration, drive with care, then one pedal driving stopped working, and auto hold was no longer available. Considering this all occurred over the span of about 24 hours, we knew we had to get the Blazer into service, but the next day, none of the error messages displayed. A bit flummoxed, we took our Blazer EV to the dealership to see if all this was a red herring or if something was really wrong. What we got back from the dealer was alarming. The single longest list of major faults we at Edmunds have ever seen on a new car. And then another X post from a couple of days ago, Kevin Williams, who was trying to do a road trip with his Blazer EV, said the Blazer EV didn't make it. I stopped live streaming my trip because a charging event saw me stranded in Whiteville, Virginia. And then, ironically, down here, he says, anyway, say hello to the 2021 Nissan Titan that saved my butt, which of course is a gas-powered car. So this clearly is not going to leave a good taste in the mouths of anyone who, watches this or follows along. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, look how bad EVs are. You have to get a gas car instead in order to do a basic road trip. And then finally for the Blazer, just yesterday, Sawyer Merritt says, news, GM has issued a stop sale for its new Blazer EV due to software-related issues. Customers who own a Blazer EV will be required to go to a dealership to update the software. The issue is not safety related. Although I would say it doesn't sound particularly good when you hear what Edmunds had going on. That sounds like it could actually be safety related. But regardless, due to software issues, Chevy has had to recall the Blazer, and basically I guess you're not really supposed to drive it until you take it back to the dealership to get a software upgrade. And finally, let's turn to Volkswagen. Here you get an article from Jalopnik that says Volkswagen CEO admits it was a mistake to abandon buttons and other physical controls. Again, I'm not going to read this. I will just go ahead and leave a link in the description. But what I do want to turn to is this lovely picture here, which shows the real buttons that they're going to be adding back into their vehicles, the ID3, ID4, ID7, etc. So it's pretty gross, right? You're adding a bunch of buttons that don't seem necessary. And the screen, by the way, does not look particularly big on this. I haven't looked at the most recent VWs, but this looks like maybe a 13-inch screen. It's not particularly large. And of course, adding the buttons just makes it look like it's from the 1990s. And of course, VW has excused this by saying they've done customer surveys and customers want more buttons. But I agree with Stop the FOMO down here. How much of this is also due to VW's software incompetence in terms of UI, lags, bugs, etc. So we end up blaming the screen rather than software execution. And if you don't know, just like with the Chevy Blazer, Volkswagen has had significant issues with their interface in terms of super lagginess, where you'll drag around on the screen and it doesn't work. Parts of the screen will just stop functioning for periods of time. You can't push the buttons you need to. So the interaction, the interface with the vehicle, which was only available on the screen, was no good because you couldn't access the things you needed to access. And that, was a significant issue. So of course, people who are purchasing Volkswagens are probably like, please give us physical buttons so we don't have to sit there and mess with a terrible interface. And if you've ever had to deal with a bad piece of software on your phone or your computer, I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. You click a button, nothing happens for a while. You're like, what's going on? Eventually something happens, you get an error or whatever. All of that kind of stuff makes dealing with that piece of software very frustrating. The good part on a phone or a computer is that if it's a piece of software, you just don't use that anymore. You find a better piece of software. The issue with a car is that's your way of interacting with the vehicle. And so if it doesn't work, it's a problem because you have no other way to interact with the vehicle, which of course is probably why VW is introducing a bunch of buttons into a vehicle that they're trying to sell at a profit. And remember, every one of those buttons has to have an electronic connection, has to be built. All of that stuff has to happen. So that increases the cost of the vehicle just to get around the fact that the software is so poor that people can't utilize the interface on the screen itself. So overall, looking at Ford and VW and GM, we're looking at 3 legacy auto companies, and we could expand this out to other vehicle manufacturers as well. But we're looking at 3 vehicle manufacturers that simply can't build software. And that is creating a significant amount of friction between the user, the person driving the car, and the vehicle. And that, of course, is assuming that their battery management system and all of this other stuff is working perfectly, which it sounds like it's really not, especially in the case of the Blazer. It sounds like that is a significant issue. The BMS is not good, and none of these vehicles have very good efficiency for using the batteries and everything. So even the part of the software that the user doesn't really see, the battery management software, the motor efficiency software, all of that kind of stuff, that is not working very well. But as far as the consumer is concerned, the part that they interact with the vehicle with, which is the screen and all of the software that actually deals with the user inputs, that stuff is not working very well, and it is making people very frustrated. And that, I believe, is what's leading these companies to say there is no EV demand. It's not that there's no EV demand. There's no demand for poorly constructed software on vehicles that just don't have any other benefits, right? They're not so fantastic that you're like, yeah, I'll put up with bad software. It's like, no, they cost more money than a comparable Tesla or a Chinese brand, and they don't have as good a software, and they don't get as good of range, and they cost more to fill up because battery usage is not as efficient, so you're burning through more energy to go every single mile or kilometer. So all of these things added together just mean that people are like, why would I purchase this? And you can especially see this going back to the beginning in China, where the consumers are very, very forward tech focused. They really want to see the vehicle have the latest technology, have the latest software, be super easy to use, have good lane assist features, all of that kind of stuff. That's a big deal to them. Of course, it's a big deal to European and North American buyers as well, but I think overall those two markets are a little less technology forward, and so legacy auto can get away with things a little bit more, but it's not a good look, and it's certainly, if you have problems and you have to return the vehicle and take it back to the manufacturer, these are all things that are going to sour people on these vehicles. And to use one of those tried and tested phrases, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Here you have these vehicles, yeah, whether it's VW or Toyota or Ford or GM or whoever, they've been building ICE cars for a century, so they have a long track record with that. But when it comes to EVs, they are making a first impression. When the buyer purchases these, they're not just purchasing a Blazer, they're purchasing an electric version of the Blazer. And that means that this is a kind of a first impression. And so the user might say like, oh yeah, I bought internal combustion engine vehicles, from GM or whatever, but when I buy EVs, I'm going to look at this again because they did such a poor job with this. So these companies, by trying to rush these things out and doing a kind of a half-assed job, are really screwing themselves, because not only are consumers not going to purchase this particular vehicle because it's poor, they're also probably not going to look at these manufacturers in the future as well, because they'll be like, well, the software was really bad last time. Why would I look at their EVs again when I can go buy a Tesla or a BYD or a Rivian or something along those lines and get better software? So overall, I think you'll agree with me that legacy auto manufacturers have really boxed themselves into a hole because they don't know how to manufacture software. They don't have everything integrated in-house, so they can't even properly build the entire software stack if they knew how to do it. And because of this, they are really losing out. When they say there is no EV demand, what they mean is there's no EV demand for them, and it's going to somebody else. And that means that these companies are going to go bankrupt even faster than people think. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new car, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.